Hello, Telvanni here, and today I thought I would bring you another Grimro style video. I'll be linking his channel down in the description below, as he is a great source of informational videos on Atlas strategies. In this video, we'll be looking at a number of our own strategies and attempting to analyze them individually. With the demand for endgame crafting materials on the rise, just how strong is essence farming? We saw that Divination Scarabs were very powerful in our last cemetery strategy, but how do they stack up when run on tower? Just how profitable is running Cassia on every map? I'm not sure yet, but hopefully by the end of this video, we'll all have a better idea. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start breaking down this Atlas strategy. When deciding on which map to run, I thought it would be a good idea to pick one with a fairly valuable divination card, as it is always exciting when you get that big ticket drop. With this criteria for our maps, 3 immediately came to mind: Cemetery, Burial Chambers, and Tower. Cemetery can drop the Brother's Stash, an incredibly lucrative card which can be exchanged for 5 Exalted Orbs. Burial Chambers has the fabled Doctor card, worth nearly 15 Exalted Orbs. And finally, we have Tower, which can drop the Nurse card, worth around 2x each. Ultimately, I decided to run Tower, as we had just run a lot of Cemetery in the last video, and I was not convinced that 50 Burial Chambers would be a reasonable sample size to work with, considering the obscenely high rarity of the Doctor card. Additionally, Tower's compacted hallways are extremely complementary to running Blight, as every Blight encounter is guaranteed to have at least one lane with Blight rewards, and if you run a cramped, enclosed map layout, you will get less lanes, but each lane will have more rewards. This means you will be getting a ton more Blight-related drops in Tower. So we've got our 50 Tower maps lined up here, and we've gone ahead and chiseled, elked, and volled them. As usual, I haven't worried too much about the rolls, as my Tornado Shot Raider can handle pretty much any modifier. And if you're interested in this build, check out the description below for a link to a video on it. Alright, on to our Scarabs. First up, we have our polished Divination Scarabs. As we are running Tower, this Scarab should theoretically double the number of Nurse cards we receive while mapping. However, as I'm recording this before I've run the maps, we'll have to wait and see how that turns out. Next, we are running Gilded Blight Scarabs. I was torn between running Polished and Gilded, as Polished are significantly cheaper at less than 1 chaos per Scarab. However, I ultimately decided to run Gilded, as it should increase the number of oils and blighted maps we receive. For our third Scarab, we are running Polished Strongbox. These will synergize incredibly well with the Sextants we are using, which we will go over here in a minute. Honestly, I just wanted something which would add a significant amount of monsters and loot to our maps, without drastically increasing our time spent dealing with League mechanics, such as Legion or Breach. Also, as Tower is a rather cramped layout, Strongbox should actually theoretically outperform those League mechanics anyway. Surprisingly, we are only running 3 Scarabs this time around, rather than the traditional 4. So for our final map device slot, we are running Sacrificial Fragments, as these are incredibly cheap and increase our item quantity by 5% each. For our Sextants, we are running Areas Contain 2 additional Strongboxes. These are incredibly cost effective, as it is about half a chaos per Strongbox added to our map. We are also going to be running Strongbox monsters have 500% increased item quantity, as between Kirak on the map device, our Scarabs, and our Sextants, we are looking at about 12 Strongboxes per map. For our third Sextant, we are running Areas Contain an additional Essence. As we are speccing into Essences on the tree, this should give us a nice little boost to the number of Essences we are receiving. And again, this Sextant is incredibly cost effective, adding 1 Essence node for 1 chaos per map. Finally, we are running Elevated Shrine, as we are also picking up a lot of Shrine nodes, and this will add 2 additional Shrines per map. It should synergize incredibly well, as Shrines add a lot of monsters to our maps. And it is another pretty cheap Sextant, costing less than 1 chaos per Shrine added to each map. Alright, on to our Atlas tree. It looks a little strange, but bear with me here. We're grabbing some traditional Essences, Strongboxes, and Shrine nodes here. Pathing over here, we are going to pick up further Essence nodes. We'll also be grabbing these nodes down here for 4 points, as they will give us a significant amount of free Delirium Mirrors, just adding raw value to our maps. At the bottom here, we are grabbing both Blight nodes, These are fairly important as they drastically reduce the amount of time we will spend dealing with each Blight mechanic. I'm not totally sold on this node down here, but we might as well give it a fair shake. Moving on, we are pathing up here to grab further Delirium nodes. Taking the Blight wheel here will give us a chance at extra Blight encounters and Blight map drops. I expect Blighted maps to make up the majority of our profits from Blight, honestly, so this should be a pretty good boost. Since we are already in this area, we are going to be grabbing the Beyond nodes here, here, and here, as they add a lot of free monsters to our maps and synergize incredibly well with Blight, as Beyond monsters spawn when you kill tightly packed monsters, and Blight is the epitome of packed monsters. Depending on how strong your build is, you might actually need to drop these Beyond nodes, as Blight plus Beyond can get a little rippy. Since we're over here, we might as well pick up these Searing Exarch nodes to bolster our Ichor drops a little bit. I really wanted to path up here and grab this node, but these honestly make the maps very rippy, and ultimately we ran out of points on our tree. Backtracking over here, we are grabbing more Essence nodes. Generally, if you're going to run strong boxes, you should grab this node, but since we are already getting this effect from our Sextants, I've gone ahead and dropped it. Coming up to the center here, we are taking as much quantity as we can to hopefully squeeze out as many nurse cards as possible. We are also grabbing more Essence, Shrine, and Blight nodes. These strongbox nodes are probably not very good, but theoretically, if we get a nurse card out of a strongbox, it'll be doubled. I ignored the map nodes since map sustain is pretty good this league, and I don't think this would really be that beneficial. Finally, we are pathing up here and grabbing this node, which will give us a chance at Covetous Shrines. These are potentially going to give us even more quantity. It's kind of a low chance for them to show up, but since we are running a minimum of 3 shrines per map, I expect it should add some value. Moving on to our expenses, let's take a quick look at what is going on here, as we have quite a bit of investment going into this. We bought our maps for a total of 150 chaos, our chisels were 15, alchemy orbs cost 5, vol orbs another 30. For our sextants, I will be talking in terms of price per charge, as compasses can have anywhere from 1 to 16 charges, so talking in terms of price per compass is unreliable. Our additional strongbox compasses were 1C per charge. Our essence compasses were as well. Our strongbox quantity sextants were about 2.5 chaos per charge, and our elevated shrine sextants were about 1.5 chaos per charge. We paid about 4 chaos per polished ambush scarab, 3 chaos per polished divination and gilded blight, and sacrificial fragments were dirt cheap, totaling up to be around 5 chaos for 50 of them. Finally, we will be running Curex Strongbox Craft on every map, for an additional 4 chaos per map. All of this brings us to a grand total of 1,215 chaos, or about 9 Exalted Orbs at the current exchange rates. This brings us to about 25 chaos invested per map. Going into this experiment, I am optimistic that we will make all of our investment back. However, there is one way to find out. So with all of that out of the way, I will start running these maps, and I'll see you on the flip side. Hello again. I've run a few maps now, and one more thing I should probably mention is that I have modified my Tornado Shot Raider for the purposes of this video to fit in a little bit of Magic Find. I don't really recommend it if you're trying to level up, as you lose a lot of defenses doing this, but it is worth noting that I am running 45% increased item quantity on gear, which isn't too insane, but should hopefully help us score some extra nurse cards. Also, I thought I would take this opportunity to very quickly showcase the power of running Blight in an enclosed map. On an open layout, Blight will spread out quite considerably, causing multiple lanes with different loot rewards to spawn. However, as you can see in the footage here, quite often when you're running Tower, you will get these god spawns of only 2 to 3 lanes. I'm going to skip ahead to the end of this Blight encounter, but here you can see that we ended the encounter with 2 Blight lanes and 6 Blight chests. We even received 2 Blighted maps out of it. So again, if you're planning on running Blight, make sure you are doing so in an enclosed and cramped layout. Another quick tip for you guys, be very careful when you are vendoring your 6 links and 6 socket items while doing this strategy. Strongboxes quite often contain mirrored items, and while 2 6-linked items can be vendored for 2 Divine Orbs, 2 6-linked mirror versions of an item vendor for 1 Chance Orb. Alright, I've just finished up running the last of our tower maps. It is important to note that I did kill the map boss for all 50 of these maps. If I were to run this again in the future, I would probably skip killing the boss for the most part, only prioritizing her on the 14th and 28th map completions to receive the Eldritch invitations, as she is rather time consuming. Also, I did not interact with the Arch Nemesis mechanic at all during this test, so if you're trying to replicate this at home, you can probably expect additional profits. Again, our overall expenses for this test ended up being 9x flat, which is no small figure. However, the total revenue we received was a huge 58x. This was an incredibly impressive 6 times return on our initial investment. Moving on, let's dive in on how exactly we are calculating this. I have excluded a considerable amount of loot as I wanted this test to be meaningful. As a result, I have only really included drops which you can basically instantly sell for cold hard currency. The first league mechanic that we were testing was Essence. Here you can see our Essence tab. We received quite a few remnants of corruption. I've gone ahead and converted all of our lower essences up and excluded all of our essences below Screaming, as anything below that is quite difficult to sell. Next we have our Blight tab. 57 blighted maps dropped during our test. This averaged out to be over 1 blighted map drop per map we ran. Again, I have gone ahead and converted all of our lower oils up to Crimson and excluded any remaining lower tier oils. And remember back at the beginning of the video when I was questioning the power of this node here? Well, my goodness, this is strong. During this test, we received a pretty impressive 8 golden oils. Only one of these dropped naturally. The other 7 we received via these oil extractors here. As Blight bosses drop anointed jewelry, quite often anointed rings with a golden oil enchantment, which means those rings have a 50-50 chance of dropping a golden oil when we go to extract them. Next we have our Scarab tab. It is a little difficult to tell where all of these came from, but if I had to guess, about 50 of them were dropped via operative strongboxes. Finally, we have our General Loot tab, which has the bulk of what we are calculating. As usual, I've converted all of our smaller currencies up via the vendor. Another interesting fact here is that during this test, we received 1,160 orbs of fusing, and over 700 of them came directly from converting jeweler orbs. I know I say this quite often, but I cannot stress how powerful 6-socket turn-ins can be. We dropped 3 exalted orbs during this test. One was found off of a monster. The other 2 came out of a single strongbox, and as it was from a strongbox specifically, it was duplicated via our Atlas tree. Normally, I would remove an exalted orb from our calculations. However, in this case, it is specifically part of our strategy. We dropped 27 divine orbs. Most of these came from corrupted strongbox via the 6-link turn-in. We also had almost 2 full simulacrums and over 10 delirium orbs from random mirrors we added to our maps via the Atlas skill tree. And here we have the big moment you've all been waiting for. During this test, we had 6 nurse cards drop. These totaled up to be about 10 exalted orbs, which is pretty similar returns to the 2 brother stashes we received in the cemetery test last time. We also received quite a few drop-only skill gems. This included 1 enlightened and 3 empowered gems. These were mostly from Eldritch minions with the gem chance altar. One of these empowered drops was actually duplicated via a small chance for monsters to drop duplicated gems. However, for the sake of this test, I have excluded this one. This brings us quite nicely to our excluded loot tab, which is quite full. We've got all of our non-favorited maps here, all of the unique maps that dropped, low-tier currency, random fossils, and garbage contracts. We've also got trash divination cards and fragments. We had several valuable unique drops, which is honestly to be expected when you're doing a little bit of magic finding. However, I have opted to exclude these. We also had a fair number of valuable cluster jewels drop from our delirium mirrors, but I've taken the liberty and excluded them from our calculations. Alright, so with all of that out of the way, let's take a look at just how profitable this strategy was by league mechanic. Running essences, we had very little investment going in. Literally only 1 chaos per map spent on extra essence nodes, while at the same time we profited over 480 chaos running these maps. This breaks down to be about 10 chaos per map for very little effort. Ultimately, I would say that Essence is an incredibly effective currency maker if you are willing to wait to sell your essences until you have bulk. Next up, the big powerhouse of this test, Blight. Blight is absolutely worth running. The only monetary investment we made was the 3 chaos per gilded scarab. We ended up profiting over 20 chaos per map. I know a lot of players dislike running Blight, but this is ridiculously easy money with a very low entry fee. Finally, are Divination Scarabs worth running? Just like last time, it is a little difficult to determine if these are worth running. However, in this test we dropped 6 nurse cards, which means we can assume that half of these were due to Divination Scarabs. This means that we profited 10 chaos per map by running Divination Scarabs. In short, as long as you are juicing your maps somewhat by adding a lot of monsters to your maps, and you are running a map with a profitable divination card like the Patient, the Nurse, the Doctor, the Brother's Stash, I would wholeheartedly recommend that you run Divination Scarabs. So to sum things up, Blight and Essence are amazingly profitable, and Divination Scarabs are definitely worth running on maps with good cards. We ended up profiting around 49 Exalted Orbs in 50 maps, averaging out to be just shy of 1x per map. Finally, a few more thoughts I have on this strategy. If I were to run this again, I might drop the shrine nodes at the top of our Atlas tree, as quite often it felt like the shrines were located at the end of the map right before the boss. And that's not incredibly helpful, especially when you get the Covetous Shrine at that point. I would definitely recommend skipping the map boss most of the time, as it is just a long, boring fight and doesn't add too much value to your maps outside of the Eldritch Invitations, which you can target. I think I might also drop the Delirium nodes on the Atlas and grab the other set of Delirium nodes. Throw a few Delirium orbs on our map, and that'll guarantee Delirium every single map. If I was going to do that, I might also drop the Curix Strongbox craft in favor of Beyond. However, at the end of the day, I am very happy with how this test turned out, and I would definitely consider running the strategy again, as is. If you can stomach Blight, I would honestly recommend this strategy over my Breach strategy, as while the profit per map is a tad lower, these tower maps were taking me around 7 minutes on average, rather than the 12-minute maps in the last test. If you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, as these mapping videos take quite a long time to produce. Thank you for watching, good luck with your league, and I'll see you in the next one.